All right. Hello and welcome to Around the Horns, the show where we cover all things with the University of Texas baseball team. I am Aaron, joined once again by my co-host, Zach. Zach, I'm going to title this episode The Ugly, the Uglier, and the Ugliest because we are going to recap a series against Texas Tech, recap a game against Texas A&M, and preview a series against Oklahoma. Not our favorite colleges across the country. Zach, do you have a bucket next to you in case you start to get like physically ill during the show talking about all this nonsense?
I took my anti-malarials, my anti-diarrhea, all the medication I needed last night. So yeah, it's painful.
Yeah, pain, sorrow. I mean, there's so many words to describe what is happening in some of these games lately. A lot of heartbreakers. Some reasons not to be concerned, a lot of reasons to be concerned. There's definitely a lot going on. We will start with the game on Tuesday night against Texas A&M. A tough 12-9 loss for Texas, a lot of runs. The wind was blowing out to left like crazy. And A&M certainly took more advantage of that than Texas did and got helped out by walks, which is the theme we've seen from the Texas pitching staff lately. Zach, what are your thoughts about the loss to the Aggies on Tuesday?
Oh, pain and sorrow. No, two things jump to mind is one, Tulowitzki, and this is not a knock on him or the Texas team at all, but they emphasize that they don't try to hit home runs. They try to hit line drives. And I think last night that somewhat was counterproductive for them because they didn't get balls up in the air and just let the wind carry. I mean, those 25-mile-an-hour plus winds blowing straight out to left.
Yep.
And they hit the ball hard. Like, it's not like they were hitting a bunch of soft, grounders. They were lining them. They weren't getting them up and getting any lift on them. And so that, and then the grand slam in the fourth, which I think many people on social media are still trying to figure out how the hell did that ball get out? I mean, he was reaching
all the way,
fully extended and just golf balled it into the freaking left field. Yeah, I think that was a backbreaker. Texas bullpen after that just, Harrison and Staley did all right. Nixon did all right. Staley gave up a couple of runs, but I think it was just too much for their minds to take on the evening.
Yeah, the wind is definitely hard to pitch in those elements because the wind makes it more important to throw strikes and pitch to contact, which is weird to say because you're so afraid of giving up a fly ball to left field and turning it into a home run. But when you're playing in those conditions and you start walking people, that is when you really get killed because that's when you start giving up 3-run homers and you start giving up grand slams. I mean, you'd rather just attack the zone. If they hit a solo shot every now and then, so be it. I mean, you mentioned the Texas offense didn't really take advantage of, the wind blowing out with a bunch of homers. They still put up 9 runs. So it's not like we can complain too much about that. It was more about the pitching staff issuing more walks, a lot of leadoff walks, and then not being able to finish guys off with 2 strikes. Those were kind of the main issues that stood out. But Jack Moss hit for the cycle for A&M. Dylan Rock went 5 for 5. So those guys, they combined for 10 RBIs and just completely destroyed the Texas pitching staff. But I don't want to spend much time giving credit to A&M. I want to more try to fix this Texas bullpen.
Yeah, and it was funny after the game, Pierce was asked about Dylan Rock, who's a UTSA transfer. And he mentioned, he's like, I think he mentioned him in the same breath that he mentioned Jace Young. It's like, thank goodness this guy's going away because every time he comes to Texas, he just hits the ball well. Like maybe he should have transferred to Texas. He loves hitting the ball there. I don't know. That was tough. And then you kind of touched on it there, but for the bullpen, those guys would get 2 outs and they would get an 0-2 count. And then it was just, they started trying to be too picky. They were trying to nibble at the zone and pitch away. And, Pierce mentioned after the game, they try to pitch backwards a lot. These guys at this point with their fragile mentality, man, those guys just got to pour strikes in. If you're going to give up a hit, like you got to fail fast. It's a huge question mark right now.
Yeah, no, it's not just that like they're trying to pitch backwards. He mentioned they're kind of having to pitch backwards because the off-speed pitches are the only pitches they can throw for a strike right now. So many different guys on the team are struggling with fastball command that they're being forced to pitch backwards. That makes them really predictable. It makes it easy to lay off pitches that aren't in the zone because you can recognize the spin on an off-speed pitch when you assume that is the pitch that's coming. But Yeah, the one other thing I think is important to touch on is the stuff with Jared Southern. He was the one that was in the game when that grand slam that you keep referencing was hit, and he got 2 quick outs like we talked about, and then he gave up a single, and then he issued back-to-back walks. If this were a super regional game, Pierce probably would have yanked him after the back-to-back walks with the bases loaded. But right now, Pierce talked about it after the game. He's really trying to learn like who he can trust in these situations, and he's trying to not just learn who he can trust, but try to give those guys experience working through tough moments and build the confidence of guys like Southern, because Southern is a guy, he's got some of the most electric stuff in the bullpen. So if you can get his mind to where he can overcome adversity, he can attack the strike zone, that's something that Pierce and Allen really want to see out of this pitching staff. So that's part of the reason why he continues to push those guys in those situations and not just immediately yank them out, like he would if it were like a super regional or a regional game.
Yeah, I think he mentioned his exact phrase afterwards, which is a little surprising, was, look, this is his game, and you're going to pitch through it or you're going to rot on the mound. And he even said, he's like, look, I'm not trying to be abusive, but I have to know what we have. I have to know that when we get to a regional, when we get to the super regional, Big 12 tournament, whatever it ends up being, he has to know what he's going to roll out there with and what he can, how far he can push them. And so, yeah, people are going to freak out. It's A&M. It's a big rivalry game. They've had they've bullpen issues, obviously, up to this point. But at the same time, Trey mentioned, he's like, look, this is just going to make us better at the end of the day. And I think Pierce feels the exact same way. I feel like Trey's, mimicking what he's saying. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the bullpen kind of comes together this weekend. So,
yeah, no, it was definitely a tough loss. The bullpen is a long way to go. Let's quickly hit on the Texas Tech series over the weekend. It was the Big 12 opener. Texas did drop 2 out of 3 in just heartbreaking fashion. They lost on Friday night on the walk-off steal of home. They lost on Saturday night on the walk-off grand slam. Both of those were in extra innings, and then they bounced back on Sunday. But Zach, what were some of your major takeaways from maybe some of the games individually or the series as a whole? Because, it was a roller coaster ride in Lubbock, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'd say first off, hands off, or, hands up for Hansen. He gives up the 3 early runs, and then he strikes out, or not strikes out, but he gets the next 17 batters out. He was Hansen of old. Like, he looked like 2021 version of Hansen, just mowing him down. I bet Nixon probably felt the worst of the team. He took the brunt of it, obviously, from social media and everywhere else. But, that's a huge tool for him also to learn from and, understand. Don't let the moment be too big for you, but at the same time, like, you can't just do whatever you want to. Like, you have to make the runners respect you. And so I doubt we'll ever see that from him again, but that's a huge learning moment for him, because that's what he likes to do when he comes set in big moments. He takes his breath, he puts his head down, collects himself, and then he rocks. And props to Kurt Wilson from Texas Tech. He saw it, he acted on it. In the post-game interview for Tech, Tadlock was asked, like, was that a call you made? And I don't think that was a Tadlock call based on his response. He was pretty coach speak. It sounded like Wilson was given a green light, but that was all Wilson just being an experienced player and seeing an opening. So if it had failed, I think we'd have heard very different language from Tadlock about Wilson and his choosing to run there. Saturday, gosh, that's the worst I've ever seen Stevens. And we've seen a couple of years of him now. That's probably his worst outing ever. 7 runs, not recording a single out.
Yeah, it
felt like he got in his head, and he just couldn't bounce back from it. Tex was rocking, man.
Stevens is like the last guy I would have ever expected that from too, just because he's like pound the zone, get ground balls, is solid. Yeah. We've talked about the ground ball variants, how sometimes, you'll get double play balls and sometimes they'll hit the ground balls where the defenders are not, and they'll squeak through for base hits. But that happened a little bit, but then it was like some long balls, some uncharacteristic walks in the first inning. So yeah, I'm not worried about Stevens long term. I'm assuming you're not either. He's earned the benefit of the doubt.
No, he's definitely earned the benefit of the doubt. He's thrown enough college innings. He's got a good arm. Plus, he's just a competitor. The guy works hard. So I fully expect a massive showing from him against Oklahoma this weekend. The thing that most impressed me, though, was the comeback. Everyone to a T wrote off Texas. 7 runs in the first inning. I'm turning the game off, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
the guys, they continue to grind. They took the lead. Now, granted, the bullpen again surrendered a grand slam to walk it off to Kurt Wilson again. Hopefully we don't ever have to face that guy again. But
yeah, it's the last time we're ever going to say his name on this show. It's banned.
Yeah, that was painful, man. That was a backbreaker. But again, to Texas credit, they come back on Sunday and they could have easily been dejected or down, whatever. What did they do? They come out and they slap Tech around like a redheaded stepchild and run rule them 7 innings, 12-1. And I think if you look at Texas as a whole on this season, I think the two performances that have impressed me the most have been against Tennessee when they won 7-2, where they battling against Chase Burns and, end up winning 7-2. And then that 12-1 victory over Texas Tech. That is the ceiling for Texas. That's where they can be. And that's an Omaha caliber team. And then the worst of their, the floor is probably last night against Texas A&M, where they cannot get it out when they need it out. So, yeah, no, it was brutal. A little bit of a missed opportunity there by you. You said slap him around like a redhead stepchild instead of Will Smith. This Rock at the Oscars. So just be a little better there with your slapping references, especially after this. True. So sorry about that. But yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. It was good to see Texas bounce back on Sunday. Even though they did lose the series, that win on Sunday does count as a conference win just as much as any other win does. So you got to pick those up when you can get them. And Lucas Gordon was awesome once again. So that's 2 starts in a row now where Lucas Gordon really seems to be building on something. So it'll be important for him to keep that up because, man, he's got to eat 6 or 7 innings with the bullpen the way it is right now. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to get into one final discussion on the bullpen. So the thing with the bullpen is early in the year, it still wasn't perfect. It was a little sketchy, but the thing was in the back end, they had Travis Staley, Luke Harris, and Aaron Nixon all pitching well. And when you have a bullpen that has a couple holes in it, but then 3 dominant guys in the back end, it's fine. You can work around that, especially when you have starters that can get deep into games like Texas. But all of a sudden, Travis Staley, Luke Harris, and Aaron Nixon, fastball command's been a little bit of an issue. Nixon the most notably. Staley's lost a little bit. He was at the beginning of the year, he would come into the game and just pound strikes, back on the mound, a lot of confidence, really good body language. And now he's fallen behind in the count a little bit. He's a freshman, so you kind of do need to lean on the coaching there to develop him and get his mindset right, get his confidence back up. But more than anything else, I'm looking for those 3 guys to turn it around. And then, sure, it'd be nice if you could get, help every once in a while from Southard or Morehouse or maybe Justin Eckhart on a weekend series. But those are the 3 guys I'm really looking to turn it around. And we know they can because we've seen them do it before, is my thing. Yeah, I would say the one that least worries me is Luke Harrison. A freshman left-hander. He's not a hard thrower, but he came in, he threw up a 0. That's what Texas needed him to do. He was pretty efficient, 13 pitches. Staley, he's coming off that arm injury where he had Tommy John. Yeah. So I kind of wonder, maybe he's been used a lot. Maybe he's a little tired. But he hasn't been used a ton recently. So maybe he just kind of pitching is a rueful game, right? You can have all your command one day and the next have none. And so maybe he's one of those guys that just has to be used really, really often. We've seen that in the past from some Texas pitchers where if they weren't used for a week, man, their whole command just went out the window. Zane Morehouse, again, he had a nice outing last night. I think that's a really big pickup for the bullpen if he can continue to throw up 0s. And then, Southard, if Allen and Pierce can get Southard to come in and throw 98, 97 and just straight fastballs and then mix in his changeup every once in a while, give him 2 innings of work, that's perfect. But he can't become picky. He's not a command pitcher. And so he's just got to pour it in and make them beat him. So they really want Southard to be the guy. I mean, we're going to continue to see Southard. You can tell just from when we talked to David Pierce, they want Southard to be the guy because they want to have the really powerful arm in the back end that, can get strikeouts in big moments and all that. So it'll definitely be big. It's too early to write those guys off. We've all seen them have success in the past at individual moments, but they've got a lot of work to do right now. But all right, let's turn the page a little bit. Let's give out some awards. Zach, this is where I would normally say we're going to give out some fun to watch awards, but after 3 of 4 games with losses to Tech and A&M, that's just not the mood I'm in right now. So I'm gonna categorize this as
something that caused us the least amount of pain award. What do you got?
For me, it's Faltini. The dude is making some money right now in the MLB draft.
He really is. Yeah.
He's always been known as a premier defender. The question was always he had a light bat, right? He had a lot of strikeouts last year, but he never hit really for power. Well, this year, just call him Trey Moonshot Faltini, because this dude, it just keeps hammering him. And they're not easy home runs. I mean, that one to center, that was laced out there. The only thing stopping the other one from going further than 374 was the wall in the bullpen. So he has 10 on the year, which means he's now tied for 10th in the nation, only 3 behind home run leading Ivan, which is awesome.
Yep.
But, in all seriousness, like we always talk about baseball, but Trey's just a good dude. He's the energy of the team. He's one of the vocal leaders of the team. Anytime one of the pitchers needs a pick me up, he's the first and last one there. And then after the games, he's always there. He's signing autographs. He's signing baseballs, taking pictures. Like, he could go back into the dugout. He can go back into the house and shut it down for the evening after doing interviews and everything else. But that's not Trey. He's mama raised him right. So shout out to Edith.
Yeah, no, that's a good call, especially with the fan interaction, especially like last night after a loss at home against A&M. He talked to us, and then he wasn't the only one. I noticed Douglas Hodo, Aaron Nixon, they were also signing autographs, and I'm sure other guys were too. So that does really go to show just like the character of these guys and how they are able to, slow things down and see the bigger picture, knowing they're going to make those kids' days even after a really tough loss. But yeah, so that's a great call on Faltini. I mean, he is still striking out a lot, but look, when the guy's playing like Gold Glove defense at shortstop, hitting 320 average and an OPS over 1,000, you're going to trade that in for some strikeouts like every day of the week. I mean, he's been straight up phenomenal, and the MLB draft stock is a good call there. So the thing that caused me the least amount of pain this weekend was Ivan and Murph. I mean, I've talked about Ivan and Murph a lot, but you really can't say enough about these guys. I mean, Ivan is tied for first with 13 homers in the entire country. Murph is now leading the country in hits, and he's second in batting average. He's hitting 472 after the Tuesday night game against A&M. You really can't say enough about these two. Ivan, he would not get out in Lubbock. It took them until the third game to get him out. Murph just keeps racking up multi-hit games. He's got a couple multi-homer games. Ivan's got multi-homer games. I mean, they're driving into left field. They're driving into right field. I mean, there's not a better 1-2 punch in the country right now than these two guys. And they are truly fun to watch, and they do not cause me physical pain. Yeah.
And then there's no cheap outs with them. You don't see a lot of strikeouts. You probably mentioned, and I just didn't hear, but Ivan is just a walking machine. Like, if he's not popping it up, or he's walking, he's hitting it at the ball. I did have one last the pain award. So last night, Mr. Tanner Witt, coming off of UCL surgery, elbow surgery, on the 28th, was back in the dugout with his teammates, dressed out in his brace and everything. And then his shining moment of the game was a ball has popped up, hits the screen, coming down the screen. Whose left arm is reaching out there? Boom. That's Mr. Witt right there, just one barehanding it. So yeah, it was good to see Witt back out there though, and being with the team and trying to help those guys. And then I think everyone was a little excited before the game during BP, because who was out taking hacks? Mr. Austin Todd.
Good call. Yeah,
that was great to see those two guys just staying involved, staying engaged, and helping the team.
Yeah, no, I've talked about the roulette wheel that is DH right now. It's just landing on someone different every single game. So hopefully Austin Todd continues to hit, his shoulder continues to respond well, and he can be the guy to fill the DH void, really consistently. We'll still want to give him days off every now and then, regardless. But if he can be the main cog to fill the DH role, that is one of the issues Texas has right now. So that would be a really good thing to see. But all right, let's move on. We've got more rivalry games coming up. My heart's my mind. I'm not sure if they're all ready for this, but we've got Oklahoma coming up this weekend. This series was supposed to be in Norman, Oklahoma, but it got moved to Arlington, to Globe Life Park. What a moment that had to be for Texas when the news came across that they would not be going to Norman, Oklahoma. So they went from having to stay in like a Motel 6 and cater burnt chicken tenders from some rundown Applebee's to getting to play in the MLB park in a nice city that has more to offer than just dirt and maybe a few Sonics. So that's a big come up for the Texas team right there. Maybe that'll change the energy in the clubhouse. But yeah, now that I'm done cracking jokes at the expense of the state of Oklahoma, Zach, can you actually give us some baseball information about this series and what we might see from the Sooners ball club?
Yeah, and I think the first thing comes to mind is that Texas should be looking for revenge after just getting hammered last year at Globe Life after that ridiculous February freeze where they didn't play baseball for 10 days or whatever it was, and then ran into the Arkansas Mississippi State pain train. Yeah, I think anytime you don't have to go to Norman, Oklahoma, it's just consider yourself a win right there. So chalk a win up already.
Throw a parade, like you can't celebrate that enough.
Yeah, and people were wondering why the sudden change. I think Coach Skip Johnson, who's a prior assistant coach at Texas, he's looking and trying to push for some facility upgrades, and they've had issues with fitting everyone in their ballpark. To be honest, I mean, it's an older stadium; it needs a lot of work. And this is going to be their they've already played 6 games, so this will be technically their 3rd series at Globe Life. It's like their second home away from home at this point. But OU comes in 15-8. They're 2-1 in conference. So they took 2 of 3 from Baylor last weekend, getting hammered in the final game, but winning a close one on Friday, and then doing pretty well on Saturday. Their Friday night guy, Jake Bennett, he's legit. He's got 40 strikeouts on the year, 1.45 ERA. He's got a whip under 1. We saw him down in Houston, and
really good.
Yeah. He looked like the real deal, man. He's going to give Texas all kinds of problems. He's a guy that goes 7 innings, so he's not going to be someone that is afraid to throw a lot of pitches. He averages up in the mid 90s, and he doesn't give a lot of walks, so he's not going to give a lot of easy hits or easy base running to Texas on the weekend. I guess OU on Tuesday walked off Oklahoma State in a non-conference game in Tulsa, where they scored 2 in the bottom of the 9th, and then the walk-off came via walk. So, they can obviously hang with the good teams. They beat Auburn. They beat Michigan, I believe it was. They swept UTSA. They swept Air Force. They did drop 2 of 3 to New Orleans, though. And so they've had a little bit of a topsy-turvy beginning of their season, not terribly unlike Texas. And then, of course, we saw them down in Houston. As I mentioned, they lost that walk-off.
They lost all 3. Yeah.
Yeah, they lost the walk-off to LSU on Friday night, which I think just really broke their back and their spirit, because then they got hammered by UCLA and hammered by Tennessee to finish off the weekend. So that was tough for them. But, they've got a couple really good hitters. Nicholas it's interesting. We always hear about people hitting at the bottom of the lineup and they're worse hitters.
Yep.
That's not what coaches do. They want to be able to turn that lineup over. I always laugh when I see that, but their best hitter is at the bottom of the lineup. And then the other 2 guys I mentioned are Treadaway. He leads the team in RBIs, and he is 10 for 11 in steals. So that's going to be a guy that they're going to look to get aggressive with. And then, of course, the best pro prospect out there is Graham. He's got 5 home runs. He's hitting 284. He's had quite a few strikeouts, not unlike Mr. Faltini, but he's the guy. He's their best player. Again, something to watch for is that base running. They're 51 of 64 on the year in stolen bases. So I hope Silas has his cannon ready, and we get to see a lot of guys getting tossed at second base. So
yeah, that'll definitely be fun to keep track of throughout the weekend. The matchup with Bennett, I mean, Pete Hansen is going to have to be on his A game because, you mentioned the whip. The whip for Bennett is .80. So, I mean, he's not allowing any walks, any hits pretty much at all. He's going to go deep into the game like you talked about. It's a big park there at Globe Life. Outfield defense is going to be a big deal. I've got that noted. So Hodo, EK, Staley, they're going to have to be flying around making a lot of plays. It's hard to hit homers in that ballpark. I mean, Ivan's not going to have any issues getting one out if he hits it hard. Same for Trey Faltini. So those guys are still going to be able to get him out if they get a hold of one. But overall, it is a more of a pitcher's park. Bennett's going to be awesome on Friday night. That's going to be a really tough one. You mentioned some of the hitters they have there. So, yeah, those are kind of the key to the series. And then the overarching key to every series right now for Texas is going to be the starters have to eat innings. The bullpen, whether we like it or not, it is a mess right now. Hopefully it gets better throughout the year goes on. But as we sit here today, that is not the case. So Steven's going to have to bounce back and go 6 or 7. Hansen needs to go deep into the game. Same with Lucas Gordon. That way they can minimize, what the bullpen is called on to do. So those are going to be some huge things for Texas. I'll let you give your prediction first. Do you have any more keys to the series? And then do we think Texas wins this series, or does kind of this drought continue against, man, I can't even imagine a loss, a series loss to Tech, and then a midweek loss to A&M, and then a series loss to Oklahoma. I might retire like 4 weeks into my media career.
Yeah, I think, again, it'll remain to be seen how aggressive Skip Johnson is on the base pass with his guys, knowing that Silas has a cannon for an arm. For me, both of the Saturday and Sunday guys for OU have ERAs over 4, like well over 4. They're not, they're pushing 5. Especially Chaz Martinez has had some pretty ugly outings. For me, I think the key to the series is not just Texas starting strong with their starting pitcher, but if they can get the offense going early and get to that OU bullpen, even I think that overcomes what Texas might throw out there in the back end of the bullpen. They got to start fast and on both offense and pitching. If they do that, I think they win going away. This was a tough one. I kept going back between a sweep and 2-1. If you look at all the analysis or analytics and everything, it suggests that Texas should sweep. And so I'm going to go with a sweep. Call me crazy. I'm putting my faith down on the offense to score enough runs. Friday's going to be interesting. How do they get to Bennett? That's the big question mark. For me, I don't think they have any issues with the Saturday and Sunday guys. But, yeah, call me crazy, Homer, whatever. I'm going with the sweep. But
no, I like
the comeback tour.
It was also a coin flip for me, but I was flipping a coin between if Texas is going to win 2 out of 3 or lose 2 out of 3. I'm worried about the bullpen, but I did notice that the Saturday and Sunday starters for Oklahoma aren't that strong, and then the Texas lineup is kind of cooking right now. They've got a lot of guys that are hot, so that did push me over the edge. I'm going to go with Texas to win this series, take 2 out of 3. Bennett's going to be a problem on Friday, but I'm not discounting Pete Hansen. He can be just as good as Jake Bennett on his best days. So that could be a complete pitcher's duel. I do think Texas has the better offense that can carry them on Saturday and Sunday, while even though the bullpen is struggling, Oklahoma doesn't have a great bullpen either. I mentioned the outfield defense will be a big part. I really trust the Texas outfield right now. Murph is making some crazy catches. He made a diving catch last night, and then he turned like a routine ball into like a breadbasket catch, but he made that look super simple. He's just the coolest guy I've ever met. So all that's going for Texas right now. I think they're going to win 2 out of 3, but I think we're going to get some more nail biters. So I'm going to have to take some deep breaths, maybe like try to do some yoga or therapy before this series, because it could be stressful once again.
Yeah, no, I don't expect it to be easy. Even if they sweep, there's going to be some nail biting moments for sure. So,
yep. All right, Zach. Well, it's that time of the show where you're going to tell us a little bit about what's been going on around the country, maybe some other series to watch besides Texas and Oklahoma this weekend. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, 5 things about Texas or about college baseball in general. We'll start at the top, literally the top. Number 1, Tennessee. Texas beat them 7-2, and since then they have absolutely just been on a tear. They pretty much lead every category in pitching and hitting at this point. That team is ridiculous, and they might only get better if Blade Tidwell really is coming back, as has been reported by Kendall Rogers. So it'll be interesting to see. I want to give a shout out to bottom dweller in the Big 12, KU. Look, y'all are trying, man. Y'all went 0-4 in the week, 0-4, but those guys had leads against Wichita State during the midweek, and then all 3 games against Oklahoma State in Oklahoma. So I think it just points to how much parity there is in the Big 12. Like, there's no easy day, right? But I want to give the bottom dwellers a shout for once, since Texas is, somewhat down there right now.
Yeah, no, we feel their pain. If there's 2 guys doing a YouTube show about the state of the, Kansas baseball program, I don't think that's probably a thing that's happening right now, but if it is, we need to send those guys like a fruit basket because we feel their pain to an extent.
Yeah. LSU, you talk about pitching woes for Texas. LSU has been little league defense pitching just bonanza. And suddenly out of nowhere, Jay Johnson says, you know what? I'm going to be announced on all three of my starters. We're rolling into a series versus Florida. What do? They take 2 out of 3 in Florida. Look, there's light at the end of the tunnel for some teams. Maybe Texas will get there very soon. Just want to throw that out there. And then another team I wanted to point out, South Carolina. Texas obviously very familiar with South Carolina and their hitter park. What do? They took 2 or 3 from Vanderbilt. So South Carolina, who's a pretty mediocre team, let's be honest, has won 2 of 3 from Texas and 2 of 3 from Vanderbilt. But to bring them back down to life, they lost to Presbyterian last night or on Tuesday night, who also gave up 26 runs during the weekend. So college baseball, gotta love it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, South Carolina's frisky, but they can also just lose to anyone at any given time.
And then, I was the last point there around college baseball before we get to the series to watch was number 6, number 7, number 8, and number 12. Those are the rankings for the top teams in the Big 12. So that's Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Texas, and TCU. Buckle up, put on your big boy shorts because it's going to be a wild ride this season. I don't know that anyone runs away with it now that Tanner Witt's gone down.
Yep.
And then 4 series to watch for me is number 1 Vols, Tennessee, going up against number 9 Vandy. Tennessee's coming off the sweep of number 1 Ole Miss. Vanderbilt's coming off the loss to South Carolina. Maybe Vanderbilt's able to touch up. I don't know. We'll see. The big ACC matchup is Florida State, who's number 5 versus number 16 Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame's for real. Florida State has probably one of the best pitching staffs in the nation. They're legit. And then number 3 Oregon State versus Stanford. Cardinals have lost back-to-back series against Arizona and Oregon to start. They won a series against Washington State, but is Oregon State for real? This will be their big test. And then Virginia, outside of Tennessee, the hottest team in the nation is Virginia. And they have been tied for number 1 home runs, Getloff with Ivan. So be fun to see him against the Rambling Tech, who just got beat up last weekend.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I mean, I mentioned on last week's show that I wanted to see Tennessee do it on the road, and they had a chance to do that against number 1 Ole Miss, and they went in there and swept them. So I am now.
They didn't sweep them. They demolished 22-4. I think was the number I saw at one point.
Yeah, I'm completely sold. I mean, we saw Chase Burns in Houston. He looked electric. You mentioned Tidwell might be coming back soon. That pitching staff is dominant. Ben Joyce, he's not their main reliever, but he had 104 the other day, the fastest pitch that was thrown in college or MLB recently. So he's the hardest throwing man, in the entire world right now, which is absurd. So they've just got a lot of talent on that team. They've got a lot of confidence. But you mentioned it, SEC, man, you don't get a break. So they've got Vandy this weekend. Yeah. So they're going to have to grind through it, but definitely impressive from them this weekend. A lot of good stuff on this weekend. It'll be another good weekend of sports. Hopefully Texas can take care of business, and we can be having more fun next week on this show.
Yes, my soul, my brain, my body, everything needs a series win or a sweep this weekend against Oklahoma. So
yeah, no, I could not have said it better myself. And with that'll do it for another episode of Around the Horns. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube page. You can like this video, leave us some comments, your thoughts on the bullpen, what you think is going to happen in Arlington against Oklahoma. You can give us a follow on Twitter. You can follow me at Aaron Little OB. You can find Zach at the Dish. Check us out on orangebloods.com. A lot of Arch Manning content as usual. That's a big one to keep track of. Basketball has finally calmed down a little bit. The women's team made a really good run, but Stanford's moving on to the Final Four. A lot of baseball content from our whole baseball team over there. So orangebloods.com, that's everything. And with that, I'll see everyone next week and hook 'em.
Hook 'em.